rodeo, but here I am.
We are in business, so welcome everyone. We are going to get started. Thank you all for joining. So I'm Tucker. I'm one of the partners at Smart Design, and I'm very excited to welcome you to our salon called Innovation Reimagined, Leading Post-Crisis Transformation. So we all know the COVID pandemic isn't over, but it is starting to feel like some of the aspects of the crisis are. And as we find ourselves emerging from this rapid change in consumer behavior, every organization has been really quick to try to move on and think about things in the future. But no one's taken the time to think about how the process of innovation has been transformed over the past 2 years. How are companies innovating their way out of this crisis? Is only addressing the now the new normal for creative leaders? And how has this rapid behavior change created new opportunities for brands and businesses? We all know creative environments are fragile, but how do we keep them healthy and refreshed going forward? At Smart Design, we are curious to find out how organizations have been adapting their approach to design and innovation. A few months ago, we interviewed 10 design and innovation leaders across a broad range of industries, and today we invited 3 of them to join us for discussion on the topic. This conversation is in advance of an in-depth examination on the topic, and it'll be released at the end of September. Before we get started, I wanted to just introduce my co-host, Morgan.
Thanks, Tucker. I'm also very excited to be here. I know that when we picked this panel for the salon, we get a ton of great insights from Alistair, Catherine, and Craig. Hi, everyone. My name is Morgan. I am an Associate Director of Strategy here at Smart Design. And what you'll see from the content today, and my favorite part in the process actually, was to be able to talk all things innovation design with our panelists, but also peeking into each of their very different organizations. So you'll get a ton of great new content adapted for many different use cases. So let's get started.
Great. So to get started, we're going to give each of the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and talk about a project they're working on or a relevant professional story. So we'll start alphabetically with Alistair. Welcome.
Hey, how you doing? Nice to meet everyone. Just quickly, a little bit about myself. I'm Alistair Curtis, Chief Designer for Logitech. I have the privilege of leading, managing, representing 200 plus designers for Logitech, globally located. We have designers in US, Europe, and Asia. We are a global organization, and we probably have been working somewhat blended in an asynchronous, synchronous world pre-COVID. I think probably COVID accelerated it. And maybe just a little bit of context on Logitech. I mean, Logitech, when we started building the design organization nine years ago, there was no internal design organization. So we built the team from scratch. So it's been a roller coaster ride of building a design organization, reinventing a design organization as we go, developing processes and how we want to work as we go. But I think probably the one thing that we've done the most is from my perspective, is not try and be a independent design organization, although we are, but not try and be an independent design organization, but be a design organization which is a partner, a strategic partner, a thinker, which is integrated into the business, is working alongside the business. I'm not a huge advocate for design being the savior. I believe design actually works at its best when it's partnering with the business and with engineering. That's one thing that I've tried to do heavily and constantly within Logitech. The project I am showing here actually was a mistake, actually. Not that this is a mistake of showing this product, but it was a huge lost opportunity because we just launched a range of products today, and I should have used that one as a PR pitch opportunity. But this is a product we launched not that long ago. It's a ergonomic mouse. We've actually had ergonomic mice several times in the company's organization, but really I think one of the things that happened going into COVID, and certainly COVID was an accelerant, was just this amplified understanding of well-being, amplified understanding that people are suffering ergonomically sometimes, and when they're working from home, that ergonomic challenge becomes amplified. So this is a mouse which we've really focused on comfort, but on top of that, we really did dial into shifting the emphasis away from sort of designing generically for a hand, but actually designing it very much focused on women's hands and optimizing it for a smaller hand than historically Logitech has done. And also much to the joy of many people out there who are the left-handed people, we actually did a left-handed version as well. So just trying to actually broaden the base and provide solutions for all, which is something that Logitech's been fundamentally trying to shift gears towards, is not designing for the few, but actually recognizing that we are designing for the all. So excited to be here. Looking forward to the panel discussions with Catherine, Craig, and you guys. And I guess with that, I can hand over to Catherine.
Great, thanks, Alistair. Yeah, I would love to be in the business meeting where you're making the business case for the left-hand version.
You know, it's interesting. It's something that we've been championing and pushing for some time. And you're right, it's an interesting business conversation, but it actually stems back to our CEO, and our CEO is actually a huge advocate for actually diversity across the board, inclusion across the board, and recognizing that sometimes the business case won't stack up, but it's about doing the right thing.
Yeah, no, that's great. So Catherine, over to you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Catherine Sun. I lead product design and research at Clear, and I'll cut straight to talking about Clear and this case study, because Clear has a pretty compelling story about adapting over the last couple of years, and it might be a little clarifying as well, because I think many people know that Clear is loved for their airport identity verification experience that allows people to skip long, uncertain TSA check-in lines. But right in 2020, right at the outset of the pandemic shutdown, as all air travel came to a near standstill with, I don't know, his historic like 90% drop in volume, our executive leadership saw the opportunity to actually scale our identity verification business with a whole new set of offerings and a new business model. And so Clear went hard and fast at expanding to other verticals in the middle of this pandemic, such as expansion into sports and entertainment. We created these VIP lines for our members to skip the line at stadiums using new touchless face verification hardware and QR codes and their mobile phones. And then late last year in healthcare, we created these things called health passes that served as digital proof for being up to date on vaccines, for getting entry into public spaces like your workplace or major events. And we've seen these heavily used over the last year from at everything from Oscar after parties to mega conferences like Google I/O. And so now with our newest offerings that are a pure digital play, so easier and quicker to develop, and also B2B play, a new business model, we are building out a new secure digital identity platform offering for partners to leverage so they can help their customers skip lines as well. So think about not having to wait in line at car rental counters anymore, because you can upload your driver's license and verify your identity in like 30 seconds, all on your mobile phone, and then head straight to the garage for your car rental. And this is something that we're going to be launching in the next few weeks, actually. So I got my plug-in. There you go. We're actually going to be launching that with a major car rental partner, and it's pretty exciting. So anyways, excited to be here. And Craig, you're up.
Great. Thank you so much. It's cool to see how the offering and technologies evolved over time. So it's really interesting. Craig, over to you. Welcome.
Hi, hello, I should say. Never say hi, I should say hello. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm a longstanding smart design fan, Tucker, as you know, and a big fan of Clear and a big fan of Logitech. I got my new iPad Logitech keyboard. It's amazing. So yeah, super psyched to be here. A little bit about me. Let's see. I'm a Capricorn. I love design, smart and other. And a little bit about me. I'm the founder of Hello. I don't have a picture of Hello up here, but this is a Hello toothbrush that we designed with with Ross Lovegrove actually, and the heads come off, and we save 85% of the plastic that normally ends up in a landfill by making a removable head, and have these beautiful sculpted aluminum handles. And super quick thing, not trying to really plug product, but I think when it comes to design, one of the things that I'm really excited about and really passionate about is not this idea of sustainability. I kind of don't like the word sustainability. I think when you sustain things, they stay the same. And personally, I don't want things to stay the same. I don't want things to get worse, but I want things to be better. So this idea of trying to make things that actually aren't sustainable, but that hopefully are eternal, like things you want to keep because they're beautiful and functional, I think that's like a higher order. And I started Hello, which is this stuff. It was me, 3 people, and a dog. Hello became the fastest selling, fastest growing oral care brand in America. It's vegan, cruelty free, all these great things about Hello. And ultimately, we were asked to join the Colgate family. So I have this dual life. I am the founder of Hello and involved with all sorts of creative and strategic efforts there. But now I find myself in this other role inside of Colgate. I'm the chief innovation strategist for Colgate. So basically, that doesn't mean necessarily focusing on product and product design, though I touch a lot of that, or at least I try to. It's also around innovation as it pertains to everything from how do we recruit and hire? How do we retain folks? How do we get involved in what I like to think of as emotional innovation, not just the technical or scientific aspect of innovation. Just a couple of interesting examples up here, and then I'll pass it back over, of things beyond this lovely toothbrush. Colgate recently helped really pioneer this notion of a fully recyclable tube. It's very cool for a couple of reasons. One is, yes, it's fully recyclable. That's terrific. Check the box. But the really cool thing for me about this product and this innovation is that they shared it with everybody. Anybody who wanted this technology could have it. And the real thing that they brought to the party, besides this new material science, was scale. That's the magic secret ingredient. Colgate is the single most penetrated brand in the world, which is very cool. I didn't know that till I became part of Colgate. They're very stealthy, very quiet about this. It's not a company that likes to have a puffed chest, but it's the most penetrated brand in the world. So when they decide to make a recyclable tube, the scale, apart from the technology, enabled them to get recyclers to accept this into the stream. So it's a pretty magical thing. And the next thing I have up there is something I'm really, really very, I hate to use this word, but I'm sleep deprived. So I'm just going to go with the short word here that comes to mind. I'm proud. I hate to say I'm proud, but I'm very passionate and excited about this other thing that's up there on the screen, this soap product. I was brand new at Colgate. We had just become part of Colgate before COVID hit. And it was the first time I used the royal we at Colgate. And I very innocently said, well, aren't we the largest, producer of liquid hand soap in the world and soaps, and doesn't washing of hands help prevent the spread of any infection, including COVID? Wouldn't it be cool if we just, I don't know, stop producing other things and we just made soap, and we made as much as we could and we gave it away to frontline workers and first responders and people in these medical communities or places where they just didn't have access to soap? And I said this very innocently, and next thing you know, I was on an email with a bunch of folks, all new to me, these folks, because I was new at Colgate, and we produced 26.5 million bars of soap. I insisted that we create a 3D printed debossing tool so we could write little messages in every bar of soap so they all say different things. And we distributed it. We took over a multitude of manufacturing plants and converted them into soap manufacturing plants. And we partnered with the World Health Organization and gave away another chunk, apart from these soaps, of cleaning products and capital. But the coolest thing was that we did this really fast and with no fanfare. There was no like, well, what's our corp comm strategy going to be? It literally was like, this is the right thing to do. Let's just go do it. And I thought, what an amazing place and what a treat for me to be able to be part of a company that could do something like that. So a little bit about me and passion for brand. And one other thing I got to add, because I listened intently as Catherine and Alistair were talking about innovation. One of the things that really got me, and I think this soap example is another important one, it's the speed with which these changes have occurred. To hear, you talk about, Catherine, how quickly we could develop these, our technology to work in a COVID environment, and Alistair, to hear about people staying at home and working from home, and trying to quickly combat repetitive stress. This is magic. The idea that we can innovate in real time at the speed of thought is in and of itself an innovation, really. So excited to be here, and
Exactly.
Thank you for letting me wax poetic.
No, perfect. Thank you, Craig. Great intro, and really some interesting stories there that we look forward to hearing a little bit more about. So just as we move into the discussion, a couple of housekeeping items. For everyone attending, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to type in any questions you might have as we go along. Morgan will be keeping an eye on that, and towards the end of the time, we'll come back to those questions and wrap the salon up with a few of those questions from the attendees. This session is being recorded, and a summary along with links will be available in a week or so on the Smart Design website if you're curious about any of the information. So let's get started. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see everyone better. So the first topic that I wanted to get into is really thinking about how, and Craig has mentioned this, everyone's already mentioned it a little bit, but how digital transformation has actually changed the innovation process over the past 2 years. So, in my world, digital transformation of a product or a business was one of our go-to tactics when we tried to help our clients. But the irony of the past 2 years in some ways is that digital transformation has actually been applied to the innovation process itself. And now it's helping, companies change the way they work, which is really interesting. With COVID fragmenting the way we work, we've been forced to make investments in new technologies and new ways of working that has really changed the game for design and innovation. I'll start off with Alistair. You've talked a lot about how digital tools have driven a democratization of the design and innovation process. Examples such as recording design reviews and making them available for entire teams, people who are starting. How have you seen these types of tools and ways of working change the process from your perspective?
Well, going back to the sort of the intro, I think in many ways Logitech was already pushing towards that sort of an accelerated state of digital transformation, because it's core to one of our businesses, creating video collaboration equipment. So it was a little bit like we have to walk the walk, not just talk it. So we were already in many ways moving into that space. We are a global organization, so we were already in many ways operating in this sort of weird hybrid asynchronous and synchronous world. COVID just was literally like a massive accelerant, and I'm sure I speak for everyone. It changed the game considerably, sort of overnight. In the very early days, it was all hands to the deck to make sure people got 3D printers. Everyone had desks, chairs, monitors, all of the basics in place. But then as we started to find a rhythm, it was then just trying to hone skills and hone tools to get over that initial hump of craziness, to then to sort of avoid the burnout and then create some sort of steady state of working. Mural became a standard. Obviously, Zoom became a standard. Like you said, we tried to respect everyone's time. So Zoom recordings, so people didn't have to join every Zoom meeting. Reviews, so everyone doesn't have to join a review. They can always dial into reviews. Miro walls instead of for sketch walls. Some worked and some didn't work, but it was a sort of a bit of a suck it and see in some places. And then, to be fair, we can paint the picture of the digital transformation, and I kind of want to also recognize there was times when analog was key, and I know that members of the team were meeting in parking lots to share samples and look at things, FedEx things around and talk about things. So there was no substitute in some places for the physicality of what we do. But it was surprising how, and I guess it was a little bit like what Catherine was saying, how Clear had to just pivot and think differently. It became an incredibly great forcing function. I think it was surprising how everybody adapted and learned new skills incredibly quickly. It was almost like sink or swim, a Darwinian moment that we're all going through. So I think I think now as we come through the other side, there is this sort of sense of, well, what tools do we want to maintain? What worked well? What do we abandon? what is that future state? And before we went live, we were talking about it a little bit of like, what is hybrid work? And I don't think we truly will know that for maybe another year or 2 years until we finally net out on what is the right model for how we want to be working. But it's fascinating how, I mean, we're all here now, 50 some people remotely and having a conversation, which would have been in the past, we wouldn't have dreamt of doing this something. So it is, I think, incredible sort of democratizer. And I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but I think the one thing that also for me is the digital transformation, as it were, has enabled us to rip up the rule book as far as where talent's based. And I think that's the thing that's the most interesting for me, is talent can be anywhere now. And the rules of you have to be in the Bay Area or you have to be in New York are completely gone. I mean, I've got members of my team all over the country, all over the world, back at home with parents. And I think that's actually one of the great upsides of what COVID has driven, to allow people to have a little bit more of a base where they want to be.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and that that aspect of it does bring up the question of time. And you know, Catherine, it's interesting to think about how the nature of collaboration has changed to be a little bit more asynchronous with all of these tools, which it couldn't be before. The only way you could have a brainstorm before was all at the same time. And now we're, you know, you wake up in the morning and you see things added to a board that weren't there when you left. You know, where, can you talk a little bit about how that aspect of collaboration has changed as you've been trying to shepherd design innovation at Clear?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the design and innovation community has always had collaboration hardwired into them. So the scaled usage of these digital tools has just essentially supercharged design's ability and everyone's ability to work cross-functionally and asynchronously. And what's nice is that design can actually lead the way, especially to model how to do it well and get to the right output and outcomes. So most obviously, yes, the digital tools of today can help bring disparate, distanced voices and minds together in one digital space to work through challenges together, but not together. But essentially, there's fewer excuses not to collaborate now, which is great, right? And I was thinking about this week, and I realized something that's really interesting to me is that the digital tools that have really, I think, resonated and risen to the top and stand out help, like design tools, they help make the abstract more concrete. But these tools, also the new tools, the good tools, they give more dimensionality and richness to the collaboration and conversation. For example, it's so easy to like drop emojis and GIFs and memes and video clips to drive a point home and bring humor and emotion and weirdness to what otherwise would be a pretty dry email thread, or, you know, arguably just like a bunch of sticky notes, right? Or, you know, lots and lots of, you know, talking on a call, boring. And I truly believe that this richness and playfulness and concreteness all helps with when you're going through these cycles of divergent and convergent thinking, which is going to have to boost the quality of thought and output.
Yeah, that's interesting. That really makes Post-it notes feel boring. When you kind of think about it all, right?
But,
Like,
but
wow, I
sometimes they're
can't
in
imagine
different
just
colors.
Sharpie and a Post-it note.
That's right.
Yeah, and Craig, I know you're an analog person at heart, so I'd be curious to hear about how, you know, what you've learned trying to embrace some of these digital tools when you had to.
Yeah, I think for me, the most interesting thing has been the ability to see people dreaming, engaging, spitballing, brainstorming from where they live. Normally it's like, okay, we're going to meet in that room, or, oh, it's really cool, we're going to have an offsite and we're going to be put in this artificial setting for a discrete period of time where, we're going to get our creative juices flowing. I mean, how contrived is that? And we've all done it, and we've done it with, different degrees of success. So I don't want to use the technical term shit all over that. It's great to have an offsite and do all that stuff. But I think it's amazing to see where people do probably 95% of their dreaming, and maybe that number is below, which is usually in the place where they're really comfortable. I mean, for me personally, it's like the shower and the car, like the two best places. I can't tell you how many video chats I've been on from the car, parked in the driveway, parked outside the office, parked outside another place I needed to be. It's great to see people in their comfort zone when they're supposed to be maybe a little uncomfortable and trying to come up with the future. It's really, I think, been great to watch people say, oh, excuse me a second, my child is in need of something, or, oh, I gotta let the dog out. I literally was just on a call before this where someone's like, I'm really sorry, I drank a lot of Gatorade and I also have to let my dog out. I have to let myself out and I have to let the dog out. I think that's great. I love to see where people, again, are dreaming when they're asleep. We've all had meetings where someone's working from the bedroom, right? I think that humanizes and immensely, and it's a literal and figurative window into where and how people live. And I think that's been lovely, and it's democratized, I think, or humanized is a better word. The way we're sharing, because you get to see where and how people are living, and I think that's just helpful, and it's personal, and I think that's been a wonderful benefit. As much as I love being in the same room with everybody, it's also great to see like what we choose to have in our personal space. It's great, it's a little voyeuristic touch, but it's not really about the voyeurism. It's about the humanity of it all. So I think that's been a surprising benefit. And I've been in meetings where people will comment about something in someone's background, and then that becomes part of the creative session. And that wouldn't happen in a room filled with Post-it notes, not in the same way.
That's super interesting. Alistair, I think you got two new ideas right there for input devices.
I know.
Shower and car. You can put those on the roadmap right there.
Yeah, and
driving a convertible in the rain is the best for brainstorming.
Walk-in meetings as well. I can't tell you how many walk-in meetings I've had, which has been phenomenal.
I had one. I had one extended one this morning. Yes, and then the fun thing is we compare our steps, not just our thoughts, but how many steps did you get in? That's also been amazing.
Yeah. Well, there can be something so refreshing about just an audio call these days too, where you don't have to be on all senses. So I think that's an interesting trend that we see picking up a little bit more, where people are preferring just to have an audio call. So great. Kind of moving and transitioning into one of the other topics we wanted to discuss is related to this humanity side of things, is really the new frontiers that we're seeing in human-centered design. Obviously, smart design is a pioneer in this space, and it's something we believe really deeply in. And what we found in these interviews is that in the kind of high pressure, high stakes time that we've been coming out of, it's been harder for organizations to keep a long-term view and really remember who their customers are and why they're their customers, because we have been so far removed from the reality of a lot of people that we're designing for. And so, but we have seen that organizations are committed to investing in human-centered design as a strategic capability, really in a couple of ways, and having it be applied both externally to the products and services that they're creating, but also applying it internally to the way that they're working and how they're functioning as teams and organizations. Catherine, we first chatted when we started, you talked about how Clear has been on a mission to kind of, really their origins come from developing a really cool and interesting tech to really figuring out how it can be more in the service of consumer user needs. Can you give any examples of how you've seen human-centered design evolve while you've been there?
Well, I mean, I think, one of the biggest shifts in human-centered design over the last couple of years is a different three-letter acronym DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And design has always been about putting humans at the center, as we all know, but it's not just any humans that you have to put at the center now. It has to be a full rainbow, a full spectrum, and especially edge cases and marginalized populations. And of course, SMART knows so well the power of finding innovation and insight when you design for extreme edge cases, extreme users and edge cases. But accessible and inclusive design is more important than ever. And when your mission is to make your UX and UI bulletproof with respect to usability, that means making sure you have to leave that time in your tight development cycles to do the rigorous testing and the accessibility compliance assessments to make sure it works for all, so that your hot tech is not just usable, but also equitably comprehensible and equitably effective for all. And so, yeah, it's going to take more time and cycles of development to get there. But it's absolutely a critical and more widely held imperative today for sure, which is really, really awesome. It's a silver lining from what we've been going through for sure.
In that context, as you've been trying to grow a team that has the ability to deliver on that vision, what has been some of the harder, parts to fill or ways to accomplish that as you've been struggling through
that? You mean as building out a team?
Yeah, I'm just curious about, because I imagine that some of the areas that you're focused on are, they're new capabilities that maybe the organization didn't have before, maybe some of the rigor around the usability testing, or even some of the upfront design work that needs to be done.
Yeah, I think, from what we've been seeing, just having a bench of talent on your team that breaks the homogeneity of what the tech world looks like, and enabling diversity of thought. Diversity of thought leads to greater exploration of ideas and surfacing more insight on the human condition. So it's a win-win, but it's hard. It takes time to also get a diverse talent bench in. There are, we all know how hard it is bringing in talent these days.
Yeah, it's not easy to hire right now, that's for sure. Alistair, when we were chatting about this last week, you had used the term humanity-centered design, which I thought was a nice build on the typical acronym of HCD. That definitely sounds like the next frontier. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about what you meant by that. Oh, maybe sounds like maybe lost Alistair with Wi-Fi. Craig, maybe we'll pass over to you.
It was such a good question you asked.
I know.
Seeing
okay.
Alistair's my listening face visual up there is tremendous. See, that is human-centered design. You're back.
I am back. Sorry, my Wi-Fi keeps crapping out on me, so I'm gone videoless for a while. See if it just stabilizes. So apologies about that.
That's good. Did you hear my question about humanity-centered design?
I didn't hear anything. I'm sorry. I was frantically trying to get back online.
So the question was, just when we had talked last week, when we were talking about human-centered design evolving, you had mentioned humanity-centered design as an interesting play on this evolution. Curious as to sort of what you see as maybe this next frontier of things that designers and businesses might need to be thinking about.
I think humanity-centered is a little bit grandiose. But certainly from Logitech's perspective, we've restated our mission to be about all people and the planet. And I'm blanking because I've been so panicky trying to get back online exactly what our mission statement is now. But I think that the restate for us is about how as a design organization we can shift gears from being sort of people-centric to people and planet-centric. I don't want to say humanity-centric because I think people and planet is more appropriate for where we are as a company. And I think that's, for me, that's an interesting position that we're taking, or I think it's the right position, but it's an interesting position because first of all, it touches on everything that Catherine was touching on as far as you are now designing for all, you're not just designing for the select, and you have to be very specific and crisp about who you were designing for. But there is also the filter of planet. And even though some people might want, you still have to think about, yeah, but even if they might want, is it right for the planet? And I think that's the interesting sort of now dilemma now. It's not about human centered, it's people and planet centered. And it's and for me, it's a shift in gears for us as a design organization. And we've just to contextualize it, we've just done a huge organizational change in the design organization with a very specifically, so we can have people dedicated to drive how we think about designing through the lens of DEI for everything we do. How do we think about sustainability? Sorry, Craig. Through everything we do, and actually make sure that at every gating process of every project, we've got questions and challenging to make sure that we're not just sort of hitting the brief from a business perspective, but we're making sure that we are truly making sure that this is addressing the needs of the individual and the needs of the planet with each of the projects we do. Now, we've got a long way to go. I would like to say it'd be great. It's great to talk about it, but it's a rebuilding of how we're operating as a design team. So in some respects, you come back to us in 2 or 3 years and it's a re-education, I think, of the design team, it's day one in many respects today. And we're sort of going through that huge learning curve to how we think and operate differently as a design organization.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think, you know, at least from my perspective, a lot of that human-centered design background really comes with empathy. And when you start to look, just, you know, I feel like for many years, design is all about having empathy for the end user, which is important and critical to what we do. But I think in the interviews that we did, we also saw a lot of organizations who were focused on turning that empathy inwards to understand the people they're working with, whether they're your peers or your colleagues or your partners, and not, you know, maybe taking it to the same level of doing ethnography work and that kind of stuff, but, you know, really using those same mental models to actually create work environments that are really more effective and resonate for everyone. And Craig, I know you've been doing some work, you know, when a small company comes into a big company like Colgate, I'm sure that you're like a deer in the headlights, and I'm sure there's a lot of opportunity to bring some of that thinking into an organization like Colgate.
Absolutely. And honestly, one of the things that's been so fascinating for me is I didn't know I would have the role that I have at Colgate. You know, sometimes a company gets brought in, acquired, whatever euphemisms you want to come up with, and it's sort of like, you know, thanks, we'll take it from here, and off you go. It's been incredible to be able to learn as much as I've been able to learn in the past 2.5 years, but also how like embraced Hello has been by this really big company. You know, Colgate operates in over 200 countries around the world, and I started Hello as me, 3 people, and a dog in Montclair, New Jersey. So, you know, wildly different scale, obviously, and the way we would. I hate to even use the word hire at Hello. We didn't hire people. We get people who joined, you know, and there was a subtle but a very important difference. And I remember sharing with Colgate folks from the HR team, one of the things that I had a pretty big hand in developing was homework for people that were looking to join or that we wanted to join Hello. Not, again, come to work, get a job, but join. And I asked somebody on our team if I could share what they did as part of this homework, because I would never just share someone's stuff. And they said, please share, and that I knew Hello was the place I wanted to be because I was asked a question like this and in the way it was asked. And that question was, as part of this homework, I pose this question to people: think of something you love and draw it. Now, this isn't for designers only. This is for anybody. It's not sort of like, oh, I'm a designer. I've got skills. I've got tools. I've got the Adobe suite. I've got, I've got all the things I need. I can really, do something visually dynamic and exciting. This is for anybody. You could be in finance. You could be in logistics. You could be in any role. So this one particular person, her response, she drew an incredibly complex, intricate, fully functional maze. She's a maze maker. That's what she loves. She also loves some other things. She's a roller derby person. I mean, she's a very dynamic, interesting person, but she loves mazes. So she drew this incredible maze. It happened to be beautiful, but it's incredible. And she does mazes on the heads of coins. And she does mazes that are, the size of, giant walls. And she makes them with wood carvings and you name it. She's a maze person. So she drew this maze. And the thing is, she's in logistics. Like, her entire day job is figuring out how to navigate really complex mazes where she thought she had a clear path to get something from point A to point B. And all of a sudden there's a new blockade that's come up out of nowhere and she's got to develop a new path to get through this maze. So the thing about this is that my thesis, and maybe that's too, bullshit a word to use here, but my hope was that if we as an organization had needs and we could find people that had a love, and their love was going to satisfy the needs that we had as an organization, they'd never work a day in their life. They'd be doing what they love, and we would all benefit. They would have the benefit of doing what they love, getting really good at it because they were never working. They were doing what they love. So they would do it more and more and more with more passion, more intensity, learning more along the way. The organization would benefit from their passion and the learnings, and it'd be this incredible, magical scenario. And we started using this all the time. And there were other questions too, but that's just my favorite one. And it's been amazing because, again, when you're creating a group, a team, building an organization, it's a very unique time, because in life you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family, is the old line. But when you're building an organization, a team, it's like being able to choose your family to some degree. So think of the kinds of questions you would ask, and to create interesting filters for how to read the answers you get as another part of the magic. So talk about human-centered. We're not just human-centered around the design, we're human-centered around the design of the company, of the team. And I think that is a wonderful thing that we've been fortunate enough to have at Hello, and now we're starting to see how we can morph that over to a larger organization, and they're embracing these types of things, which is great. The fact that someone like me is there, it boggles my mind in a good way. Like, how cool to embrace. When we became part of Colgate, I asked myself, do they know I don't know how to tuck in a shirt? Do they have any idea that I don't know how to shave, that I have a guitar next to every desk? But they did. That's exactly what they wanted. They wanted people to go back to something. Catherine, you said earlier, this notion of diversity of thought. And I think that's up to us as stewards of our brands and of our design efforts to bring that stuff to the fore all the time. It's great.
Yeah, that's, super interesting to see how a lot of those things are turning inwards, and actually how much of a huge impact they can have on, if you think about the hours that we all spend in the careers that we love. I mean, there's a huge, when you look at design problems, sometimes you think about, well, what kind of impact can I make? And this seems like a situation where the impact can be so huge. Kind of transitioning into, it's a good segue into another topic. Thinking a little bit more about how the role of being a design and innovation leader is changing. 15 years ago, Daniel Pink wrote a book, A Whole New Mind, and he was saying that leaders of the future will be right-brained. So artists, inventors, storytellers, holistic thinkers, not because they were always the smartest person in the room, or having the greatest expertise, but because they have the traits that could be crucial for future of business and societies. Things like empathy that we've been talking about, trust, ability to foster creativity and lateral thinking. And thinking about sprinkling on 10 years of digital transformation as sort of a gasoline to some of that concept, it's really interesting to see where we are, where I think that in our interview series, we really were seeing a lot of people who were thriving were really creative connectors, and they were kind of the new innovation superstars. It's not about tenure from what we saw in the interviews or rigid process optimization. It seemed like it was really about being able to connect the dots, invest in the right capabilities, kind of keep cross-functional creative talent engaged, and really thinking about this diversity of thought that Craig mentioned. Alistair, when you think about that in the context of what you used to spend your time doing 3 years ago versus what you spend your time doing now, is there anything that's really changed about some of the what you prioritize in trying to lead a team of the size and scale at Logitech that you do?
Oops. First of all, just apologies for losing connection. Sorry, I had Wi-Fi issues, which I guess everyone's lived through that pain over the last few years. So anyway, apologies about that.
Humanity we've been talking about, Alistair.
I know. It always happens at the worst time. Yeah, I mean, my role, the role's changed a lot. The role going into COVID felt very crisp and very sort of secure and very known. Albeit you don't know where the business is going in the landscape of the business, but in the grand scheme of things, what you were doing was you knew where you were and what you were doing. I think as soon as COVID kicked in, there was this sort of like just everything, all bets were off and things changed. I think the thing that I was most cognizant of early in the early days was making sure in times of uncertainty you could connect the dots for the team and help fill in the blanks and help make sure that people didn't spiral out of sort of control with creating weird narratives, because we were all living in our own bubbles, and we still are living in our own bubbles to a certain extent, but we were all very much living in our own bubbles, and everyone was in very, very different places with, be it people in a flat on their own, or people with families, or people who were suddenly back at home with 6 kids and 4 pets, and the challenges were very, very different for every person. People who were sort of rock stars before COVID were suddenly finding it really, really hard, and vice versa. And introverts, I mean, it was just so very, very different. And I think you took on a role where you were leading as a managing through people's well-being. You were trying to avoid people having burnout. You were trying to give space to people as much as possible. The norms of the past of being a leader were very different. I think it was critical to show vulnerability. It was critical to spend more time listening and giving people space. And I think that I mean, for me, and so those were all the things in the early days. And then as it evolved, you're trying to then work out to create some norms so people could have stability. As a company where I think we're incredibly privileged to have a CEO who's incredibly empathetic, actually. He created a very flexible organization where people could take time whenever they wanted. We had lodgy days, lodgy weekends where the whole company would go offline. We have no meeting Fridays. We put as many things in place to give people their own time to get the job done when it suited them versus the traditional 9-to-5 model. So I think that was the most telling thing, and for me is how we. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I already talked about it. I think that the CEO is incredible for Logitech. Bracken's an amazing CEO. So he enabled a behavior and a culture which got us through COVID. And I think now coming through the other side, we're shifting gears as a design organization. We're shifting gears of how we're working, how we're structured, with a view that in some respects, we hit pause on how we were developing as an organization for 2 years. We hit pause because we didn't want to overstress the system. We didn't want to rock the boat at the wrong time as the company's going flat out to deliver webcams, to deliver microphones, to deliver things to get people through the day to day. But now as we're coming through the other side, it's like, okay, now we hit pause. How do we unpause and now sort of slingshot the company forward? And now so my role has gone from being that sort of pastoral care to now how do we actually think about slingshotting the company and accelerating the company forward. So it's it's kind of a very different role from what it was before, what it is during, and where I think it is now moving forward. And I've purposely reorganized the company to give myself more time to help with bandwidth versus necessarily being buried in the everyday, which I was for 2 years.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And I mean, you know, we know, as I said in the beginning, just how fragile creative organizations and teams can be. And I think, you know, Catherine, I know you've talked about some of the challenges of keeping your teams inspired in this kind of hybrid work environment where, sure, it's convenient to work from your bedroom. Is that the best idea long term? You know, is that always okay? And then sometimes you have situations where people make the effort to come into the office, but then they're on Zoom calls all day. And so why they made the effort for what purpose? And so how have you started to try to navigate, you know, we were talking about this in the beginning of the call, but how have you started to try to navigate or experiment with trying to find new solutions to navigate some of these issues within hybrid work and creativity?
Yeah, I mean, I would say my approach to this is my approach and rooted in who I am, which is a nurturer. I'm a nurturer and also and somebody who has spent a lot of time doing design research. So to your point that you were making earlier, I've turned my research skills and pointed them right at my team. And you know, so I believe that you know, an org and a team's ability to be creative and productive and hit those milestones and achieve objectives, it all starts with having a deep understanding of where your team is at and actively coaching through whatever the latest conditions are, because those conditions can change on a dime. And you know, like we've been talking about, like we've been saying, like, you know, Craig was saying, you have to recognize that not everyone works and processes info and thrives in the same way. But what's interesting is I think you literally have to ask now. You have to engage in that dialogue. You can't infer it anymore. You can't easily observe when others are telegraphing disengagement or discomfort in their body language. You have to have the discussions around learning styles and communication styles and triggers and needs. And you know, I think we all know that ideas flow and brilliant solutions manifest when minds are open and people feel safe and hearts are light. And so, yeah, like all those, you know, really as a leader, just, you know, to what Alistair was talking about, you have to lead in a whole new way. And it's your responsibility to set the tone, model where you can, actually. And sometimes just outright give people homework to take better care of themselves, actually. Self-care and self-kindness is so important, especially if you are a leader of leaders. I often go back to this great definition of leadership that I love a lot. And it's that leadership is about managing your own energy so that you can manage and direct the energy of others. And that's like helping to scale yourself by helping others. It's that whole, like, you know, put your mask on first kind of thing. So.
No, I mean, it's really interesting. And I think it's going to be a challenge that we'll continue to face, especially as we have, you know, at least my experience at Smart is, you know, we've always brought a lot of talent, creative talent up from a very young age within the organization, interns all the way through. And I think that the ability to learn and grow sort of through osmosis has been reduced through this world that we're living in now. And so, you know, I remember when I was younger in my career, my eyes were always on what other people were doing, not what I was doing, because that was how I know what I could do. I want to see what other people are doing. And now that's a much more contrived or deliberate or, you know, much more specific experience than it used to be in another type of work environment. So, I mean, Craig, do you have any sort of thoughts on how your role has changed and going from, what maybe was a startup to suddenly scale, and how do you take your leadership skills and apply them at scale?
Man, I don't know how much time we have, so I don't want to go
3 minutes.
too long. But in 3 minutes, when Hello was literally, myself and a handful of people and a dog, sometimes two dogs. I used to say all the time, I still say it, that every day is Monday and we're late. It was like go, 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 but it was really fun. There's like this negative to hustle culture and all that stuff, but for us, it was really fun because there was an immediacy to everything we were doing. I used to also say we had no layers and no legacy, which was also very liberating. Now, as part of a big company, the challenge for me is how do you bring that level of enthusiasm and can do, and we're going to change the world at scale. And the good news is it like Colgate doesn't just profess to be a caring company, they really are a caring company. That's legit. And they make wellness products. I mean, yeah, you could argue, well, is Palmolive dish soap a wellness product? I don't even want to go there. Oral care, oral health, and whole body health are inextricably linked. Like, you can't disintermediate the need to brush your teeth, right? There are a lot of other things maybe you can't do. Maybe during a pandemic, self-care, like we were talking about earlier, is really critical. And for a lot of people, their tube of toothpaste was the dentist. They didn't go to the dentist. Like they weren't going, to seek care in other ways, but they had to take care of themselves. So as a company that makes wellness products, there's a seriousness, there's a gravitas, because we're creating things that are helping people, on the daily with their well-being. That's critical. And that's the product side of it. But the product and the company, to make sure that we make sure that they're meshing the right way, that we care for each other, we care for the people that use the product, we care for the vendors and the suppliers that we work with, the people that are in Colgate's plants, like all this stuff had to be seamless. And I feel like a lot of my focus is to bring this level of enthusiasm to as many people as possible, and to use a word that is not a good word to use when there's a pandemic, infect them with this sense of possibility and hope that we really can make a difference and really help people. And I think it's always been there at Colgate, but I think part of my role is to get people that much more inspired that we can do it, and that we can bring new to very stable, staple categories, and have that level of new be emotionally relevant and culturally relevant. And I think that as an entrepreneur, to be able to bring that to scale to a mature business is a challenge, but it's really exciting. And the fact that so many people are embracing this this way of thinking inside of Colgate, this sort of entrepreneurial mindset, is amazing. And when I started there, I said to Noel Wallace, who's the chairman and CEO, I said, you have almost 35,000 entrepreneurs here, if you think of them as such. And I think part of my role is to help unleash that level of creativity and can do that's already there. It's not like it's not there, it's there. But coming up with funky, cool new ways to manifest it and do so quickly and at scale. It's been an interesting transition, but I love it. And people do say to me, they're like, but you had an exit. And I'm like, we didn't have an exit. We had an entrance. This is great. I started an oral care company with a handful of people, and now we're part of the largest oral care company in the world. That's not an exit. That's a chance to bring your message and your set of behaviors to many more people all over the world. It's a gift for us. So
no, it's great. Yeah. I think that's always been, at least for me, being trained as a designer, one of the gifts of that is, you can't be a designer if you don't think there's a better world around the corner, because otherwise, so what are you doing? You sort of have to believe, you have to be optimistic by definition. Otherwise, you're not, there's no motivation and there's no drive. And so that mindset, which I think is inherent to design, I think can have a lot of power in other functions within an organization. And so I think that is a role that we can all have with as we work together. I'm going to give Morgan a chance to take a look at some of the questions and see if we can answer something from the attendees.
Yeah, we have a couple of good questions here. So the first one is, I guess, general. So anyone who has an answer, feel free to answer this question. This person has spent most of their career in the biotech industry, and historically there was a clear phase separation between R&D and commercial teams. So R&D invents, creates, builds, and generally innovates, and commercial takes those outputs and brings them to market. However, digital transformation has changed that, and now commercial teams are also required to innovate and develop new things to complement and augment the existing products and services on the market. So from an org design perspective, this has been a challenging adjustment. This person is curious to hear from you guys if others have experienced changes like these in their industries and how you have adapted to that.
Stumped.
Catherine, I think from the conversations we've had prior to the salon, you were talking about how tools like Figma are now available to a lot more teams, and that can be challenging, but also could be opportunities. How are things like that been changed by digital transformation?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so, I think that I mean, I think there's something about digital tools that help with, innovation and collaboration. We talked about that, but I think it sounds like the question is about org design and how companies are structured. And, I remember in my days at PepsiCo, we very much functioned in this way that this person is talking about, where there was a center of innovation that was globally centralized, but the commercialization happened in the sectors and regionally. And it's a real challenge because you have to go you have to know how to go end to end and do it in a way that is that meets the challenge of the moment. And so when I think about how organizations can think that can operate more nimbly to get product to market, I do think about you have to have the right experienced subject matter experts in your core disciplines who have the depth and breadth of expertise to recommend the right options, the right steps, to build the right solutions at the right scale, to move the needle in the way your company needs to in this moment of time. And so there's this whole idea of process and rigor, and it takes a lot of organizational, existential self-examination to understand, is this the steps that we need? Can we blow things up in service of getting the right things out there? And that's a scary process to go through. I don't know if that helped answer your question, but that's the thoughts that came to mind.
If I can just add, I think from our perspective, I'm not sure there is, from a Logitech point of view, one size fits all. We have very different businesses operating within Logitech. So if I take our video collaboration business, actually the design team has been way upstream working with the commercial organization, helping to look at how to clarify and tell crisper consumer stories and how to build the stories. So that's where we've gone upstream. And in other cases, the commercial organization has come downstream where they're seeing things in the market and they're helping to sort of stimulate ideas, almost when we're still thinking about how to design the product. They're seeing data and they're feeding that data into the brief, which helps reshape the project. So it's kind of varied. I don't think yet we're at that level of maybe maturity to sort of completely rethink the organizational structure, but I think it is maybe the reality that whether you're in a commercial organization or whether you're in design,
think that's your cue,
Oh, no.
Craig.
in each other's
The
worlds,
Wi-Fi.
to live.
Oh, Alistair, you're back.
Oh.
We lost your audio for a second.
I don't know. I've got no idea where you lost me.
You're
So,
back. You're back.
Yeah, I've got no idea where you lost me. But I was just saying that I think that whether you're in the commercial organization or the design organization, I don't think there is this world of like we're at the start and they're at the end. It's actually understanding each other's worlds to go in both directions and talk to each other. I think the other thing that's kind of interesting also is just how much data may change things and how that may change the information that's happening on the front line in the sales organization. How fast can that be fed upstream to rethink how we're innovating and reshaping products for the future? I don't want to become completely data driven, but there is a much stronger sense of how do you manage that data in the early part of the organization.
Okay. Morgan, maybe we have time for one more.
Yes. So this question is for Alistair and Catherine, or maybe we could do a question for Craig, actually. Yes, right here. So Craig, we talked about brainstorming and dreaming in people's comfort zone at the beginning of this session, and how that was important, especially with remote and hybrid work. But that also means that these people that are supposed to lead those brainstorms are reachable and accountable for brainstorm contribution in their discomfort zones. So how might design leaders push their people to limit their interactions only to points in time where they are comfortable and ready to brainstorm?
Wow. That's a really, that's like a statement as much as it is a question, I think. I think if we all had our dream scenario, we would only work in the comfort zone all the time. But the reality of it is that's a dream. So I don't know if there's a way where we could say only focus on your dream time. Pressure makes diamonds. There are all the other euphemisms. Tight timelines force us to make all sorts of interesting decisions. Being in a different environment than you're used to sometimes creates great impulse and output. So I don't know that I have a great answer other than to say, with this asynchronous world we're living in, I think you sort of almost have to play a different angle. And I hate to even say play because it sounds very Machiavellian and manipulative, but I think there's a trust angle. And I think really good teams operate with a level of respect and trust that makes the team, function and create things that are much bigger than the individual. So I think it would come down, to this notion of trust. If you work in your safe place at 3 a.m, have at it, right? I'm going to be asleep at 3 a.m, most likely. But if that works for you, I trust that works for you. And if I don't see you during a meeting, I'm not going to freak out. I'm going to think, well, they're sleeping because they're up at 3 o'clock doing their best work. So I think that's kind of the trick, is to figure out how you can create an environment where people, I used to say at Hello, when again, we were still very small. And even when we grew quite a bit, we were still always small. I used to say my job is to find the coolest, smartest, best people and come up with ways where they could do their coolest, smartest, best work and just get out of the way. And people have lots of expressions for this. Are you a servant leader or whatever it might be? It's like, let people shine the way they need and want to. And I feel like the more roadblocks you take out of the way, or the more expectations you take out of the way, I think people generally want to perform and they want to do great things. So I'm sort of like, well, what works for you to do your best work? And at the end of the day, the magic's going to be there or it's not. And I think if we trust people and we respect whatever their process might be, it's going to serve us well. And if not, it becomes very apparent very quickly, and things adapt. So I don't know that there's a dream answer to that very dreamy and great question. But the other thing I would just add to it, one more thing, is that I always would say no one has sole dominion over good ideas. So you might create strata, so it might be more senior, but I used to say at Hello, like the greatest marketing idea could come from somebody in supply chain. A really amazing solve for a finance question, believe it or not, could actually come from supply chain also. A great marketing idea can come from outside of marketing. So it's again about getting to a place where you trust, and there's a comfort level where people feel like they can share whatever it is they have to contribute in the way and in the time that's best available to them. So it's about, again, like trust, open-minded, flexibility, and to the extent you can be non-judgmental. We all have biases. I have way too many to count when it comes to design and leadership styles and everything else. But just let your own shit get out of the way and let people share the way they want to, and I think magic will ensue.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that that angle of trust and sharing, I mean, even when I think back to a lot of the projects I've worked on that have ended up what I thought was in a successful place, and never, that moment of clarity never came when you thought it was going to come. It usually didn't come with the people you were working with on the project. It usually came from a conversation that was unrelated that helped reframe something. And so I think that the idea of us always being open to that happening at any point is really something that
and usually it happens at the end. There's a book my wife bought me from John Cleese that was all about creativity, and there was a study that he cites in this book where there's someone who has the timeline and they work very fastidiously and methodically, and they get up to the end of the timeline, and then there's someone who looks like they're playing golf and they're cooking dinner, they're doing all these other things, and they know when the deadline is, and all their magical thinking happens like an hour before the deadline, and everyone produces the work at the deadline, but the person who seemed to meander and be all over the place and have conversations and not be doing anything with the process, that work ends up being the better work, according to this research.
Yeah.
The people that go through this every process. So you just if it were easy, everybody would be doing it.
That flexibility is great. Well, we are at time, so I want to thank all of you for your time today. I wanted to remind everyone that if you want to revisit the discussion or share with others, we will be posting a recording of this tomorrow, and we'll have a recap in about a week. As I mentioned, this salon is sort of an advanced look at a bunch of research we've been doing around innovation and leadership, which we'll be sharing a full report around in September timeframe. So look out for that. And I think that maybe we'll post something in the chat as to where you can find that. But I want to thank Alistair, Craig, and Catherine again for joining us, and thanks everyone for listening in. So have a great night. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.